Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of On Texas Baseball. I'm Blake Munroe, joined today by CJ Vogel and Jeff Howe, who are fresh out of the media availability. Got to get a little inside knowledge. We're going to talk to them about that and then also share some insider notes that we got elsewhere as well. But first, CJ, Jeff, go ahead and give us your main takeaways from today's presser.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, good to see Texas back on the field. I know it's kind of been an offseason filled with highlights, obviously, from the heist of Jim Schlossnagle from College Station down to Austin. He said he's very excited to be down here. We'll get to that here in a bit. But the biggest takeaway that I had coming from the talk with Coach Schloss as well as a handful of players is it sounds to me like they have their number one figured out. And I mean number one on the mound, and that's going to be Jared Spencer, the transfer from Indiana State. Look, we talked to Max Ballou, we talked to Kimball Schlusler, Jalen Flores, all three of them. First pitcher mentioned from all three was Jared Spencer. So if that should give any indication of what's to come this year on the hill, it does sound to me as though that's going to be your number one guy going into the season.
Yeah, there's two big holes on offense, Blake, as we know, at third base and, in the infield, third base and first base. First base, we were watching Jaquay Stewart and Cole Chamberlain take ground balls. Kimball Schusler's in that mix too, but Adrian Rodriguez, of all the freshman position players, there's a couple of the freshman arms that got mentioned. Schloss mentioned he loves this freshman group of pitchers, Dylan Volantis, Drew Rarick specifically. But Adrian Rodriguez at third base, I mean, he was working there with Casey Borbo while we were watching practice a little bit. Again, like CJ said with Jared Spencer, that was the first guy mentioned in terms of position players. So I would look for Adrian Rodriguez maybe to early on in the year, maybe be the guy at third base. Losing Jared Thomas and Peyton Powell was two stalwarts for you offensively and defensively. So if he can handle it, I know Schloss even said, hey, it's tough for a freshman to come into the SEC and play well, but at least you got a couple non-conference series to get him ready. And that's the other thing too, Blake, that really stands out. I think Schloss feels really good about where they are in a lineup 1 through 9, and maybe with their first couple of reliable arms. Luke Harrison was a guy he mentioned too, in addition to Jared Spencer, was the only two kind of starting guys in the mix that he mentioned by name. But you start thinking about the depth of this team, and in the outfield, like a guy like a Matt Scott or a Tommy Farmer, like where do they fit in? If it's Jaquay Stewart and Cole Chamberlain, whoever loses that first base battle, Casey Borba, if he loses that third base battle to Adrian Rodriguez, how does some of these other guys factor in? So I'm interested to see early in the year, especially some of the midweek games and your Sunday non-conference series, how do Schloss and his staff use those games to get some guys that they know they're going to need to count on later in the year, maybe get those guys some time in the field, some time on the mound, and some at-bats.
Good stuff for sure, guys. And, CJ, when we recorded our last baseball video, we talked about Adrian Rodriguez, how he was in a position battle with Borba. Of course, at the time, I was being told that he was hands down the best freshman position player. They loved him because he's a switch hitter. They're wanting more left-handed batters going into the SEC, and that was a major shining point. And I'm with y'all. From talking to sources, Adrian Rodriguez just sounds like he's, going to be pressing for playing time immediately. And it really wouldn't surprise me from what I've been told if he takes that starting job.
I don't think it would be too surprising. We only got to see, and they're still practicing behind me. If you can see, they'll be scrimmaging here in a couple minutes. But we got to see like those first moments out of the locker room coming in and really just get warmed up essentially. And he was on the edge of the infield from that far third base corner, making seamless throws. Schloss actually had to come up and tell him, hey, let's try to play the position, where you'd actually play it. Scoot up, right? Don't strain yourself too early on day one, but I'm sure you got a good look at him too, Jeff. Yeah. But that's a big kid. He's listed at 6'2", but maybe half an inch or inch higher, taller than that.
Yeah, it's not so much the 6'2", it's the 210 he's listed at. I mean, Schloss said he's gained 19 pounds since he got to campus. So a kid that hit the weight room hard. That's another thing, Blake, that stood out. Looking at especially the guys that are coming back, the guys that you remember kind of what the body type looked like at the end of last summer and what it looks like now. Jalen Flores has put on a good weight. Max Ballou's kind of reshaped his body. Will Gasparino is starting to fill out. So you can definitely see the work that Matt Couch has done as far as strength conditioning goes. I mean, Jalen Flores said, hey, Matt Couch has been their strength coach, but this was by far the most he's done in terms of getting guys ready, the intensive work, really adding muscle mass. And, I mentioned Will Gasparino. I think that's an underrated thing about this team that we forget is up the middle. We talk about the newcomers and guys coming in, but you forget up the middle with Rylan Galvan coming back behind the plate, Jalen Flores at short, and Gasparino at center. The spine of your defense up the middle from catcher to center field. You're going to have one of the more talented groups like that, one of the more talented spines up the middle of the field in the SEC. So with those three guys coming back, so it makes it a little bit easier to fill in the other spots. You figure the two corner outfielders are going to be Easton Winfield and Max Ballou. So for Schloss coming in year one, I think, Blake, the fact too that he got a chance to do this at A&M the first year, kind of putting it together on the fly. So he got a feel for, hey, not just what it's like putting together a team, but I think for him going from a private school like TCU to a big public school like A&M, where, your resources are different, everything's a little bit different. I think that really gave him a good blueprint on what to do at Texas. And he said the way this team is taking shape reminds him a lot of his first team at A&M, which, if anybody remembers, that's a team that beat Texas in Omaha, was one of the last 4 teams standing in Omaha. So just really good vibes the first day, CJ, overall. Certainly. I mean, it's the first day. Everybody's optimistic, but you could tell this team, you can tell they're hungry. They're anxious, and they're chomping a bit. Like, I'm sure they're tired of playing squads and everything they're doing behind us right now. They're just ready to get to game 1 against Louisville.
Man, and that's I'm glad y'all mentioned the vibe, because that's one thing I did want to ask about. And when I had spoke to a source about a month ago, I said, what's one thing that makes you the most excited about this team? And their instant answer was just the vibe reset. We're on a different page than where we were a year ago. Everything looks different. Everything feels different in a positive manner. So I think that's nothing but great news for Texas fans to hear that and to see that reflected as y'all got to see today.
Yeah, I just speaking, because I was around the team a lot last year. Towards the end of the year, I'm not going to say it was toxic, but you could tell, man, Blake, CJ, guys were just beaten down.
They're ready to go.
They were ready for the year to be over. And I think that, David Pierce knew what the deal was if they didn't get very far in the NCAA tournament. So, being at the College Station Regional when it came to an end, it was almost like relief. I think guys were in a lot of ways relieved to kind of get the season over with. So I think just having that reset, it's a culture reset. It's a coaching reset. Like I said, with the strength conditioning, where it's just a career reset for a lot of these guys. You got to think too, like Jalen Flores probably didn't plan on being at Texas in 2025. He probably thought he was going to get drafted and be playing somewhere else. And, hey, Max Ballou said he never thought about transferring. That wouldn't stop anybody from coming after him in the portal. And, hey, tampering isn't just limited to football. It's happening in all sports. And, Will Gasparino's a talented kid. So I think the guys were just ready to just close the book on 2024, turn the page. And I think Schloss, especially for the returning guys, came in at a perfect time where they were ready for something different. And you could tell like I said, they're ready to attack it.
So, CJ, you put out a tweet while this was all going on about Jonah Williams, the two-way standout playing both football and baseball at the University of Texas. And it really lined up with the report that we had over on ontexasfootball.com, that he's still healing. They haven't got to see a lot. But what did y'all learn about Jonah from Schloss?
Well, he's a heck of a guy in the locker room, right? We heard a couple times that, he's hilarious. He's a great teammate. He's a guy that loves to be around practice. And, for a two-sport star, Texas fans are kind of excited and optimistic about, to come in with kind of that sponge attitude, to come in, learn, be around the program, be around the team as teammates. I think that's really encouraging. We did learn he's not swinging a bat, he's not throwing, but he is really fast. Coach Schlossnagle told us that. I'm not sure if that's groundbreaking news to anybody that watches Huddle Tape at all, but that was one of the big takeaways for me, is that still kind of working him back to full health after that clavicle injury. But the big thing I did take away from Schloss talking about Jonah Williams is, quote, we're on the same page. And that's Schlossnagle and Steve Sarkisian talking about his plan there for the spring going forward as well.
Yeah, he was actually supposed to be cleared in December, guys. And, here we are in January, almost the end of January, essentially. And they're still not sure on an exact timetable. They're waiting on things to come back and then kind of take it slow from there. But it sounds like both the baseball and football staff being very precautious with Jonah.
Yeah, I think, Blake, in this day and age, for a kid to even attempt to do this is incredibly. Yeah. I mean, it was hard 30, 35 years ago when guys like Shea Morenz and Johnny Walker were trying to do it. Now you're talking about in the age of specialization where, back then you didn't have off-season programs. Guys weren't around working out during the summer. It's a different world now. You're on a different planet. And the fact that he's even attempting it, there's a lot of guys over the years that were talented enough to play another sport at Texas. It's just the commitment to football was just too much. But the fact that he's out here, I think that tells you not only, number one, like CJ said, a lot about how Sark and Schloss have to be on the same page with that, with Jonah Williams' time commitments. I think it tells you a lot about not just the athletic ability, but the athletic character of a kid. That he understands what he's getting into. He knows there's going to be portions of both that he's going to miss. But you think about the guys that have done it. You're talking about Kyler Murray, Jameis Winston, Patrick Mahomes, and those other than Kyler. Those other two guys did it on a pretty part-time basis, especially Patrick Mahomes. I think he only officially pitched like one inning, the third of an inning at Texas Tech. So it's really hard, but I think that's what stands out to me, CJ, about Jonah Williams. Even just watching him run around out here, he's a kid that's full of life. Everybody kind of gravitates to him. So the fact that he's attempting it, and even though he can't do anything, still, looks like he's being a great teammate, got a smile on his face. I think that says a lot about his athletic character.
And it also probably helps that, this is week one for him, right? He's still new, he's still young. I don't know if that's going to wear him down. Eventually playing the two sports juggling. Of course, I think it was the spring game for UCF where we saw John Reese Plumlee, bat 3 times for UCF, hop on a golf cart, and then go play in the spring game or vice versa. So we'll see how that goes. But right now, all smiles, all positive right now for Jonah Williams out here.
Well, that's good. And it is going to be very interesting to see how far he can balance that over the next few years. So for sure. Well, what about the players, guys? Did you get a chance to talk to the players at all? And if so, did anybody have anything interesting to say?
I think there's one thing, Blake, and you shared the tweet from Texas baseball about the soles of the shoe, right? And the kind of the slogan, the saying that Texas has inside their cleat. And I don't know if this has been a Texas baseball tradition, but we heard that, look, Texas breaks out to the pride and winning tradition of the University of Texas will not be trusted to the Timid of the week. I don't know if that is going to equate to wins on the field, but look, if you can ingrain that culture, and just kind of that mindset early on, I think that's really encouraging. Also in the sense that just listening to Schloss, listening to some of the returners today, several times it was mentioned that there isn't pressure right now, and that might feel surprising considering the coup that Texas pulled to get Schloss here, but it's kind of the territory that comes with playing at Texas. So I think they're prepared. There's been conversations about moving to the SEC, but anything above just, the name of the jersey changes, the locations in which you play at might be a little different. I don't think that's going to spook anything about this team going into the season.
Yeah, I think, Blake, it just kind of goes back to not a culture change, but a culture reset for those returning guys. And, Max Ballou and Jalen Flores were the two big ones that they said, hey, especially Jalen Flores said, hey, I'm not even thinking about the draft anymore. This is where I want to be. This is home. I love the University of Texas. And I think it speaks to that mindset. When you're a freshman, you just want to play. When you're a sophomore, you want to start. Where at the time you're a junior, senior, you just want to win. And I think those three guys, they speak for the returning guys. They've tasted – getting close to Omaha, that Stanford Super a couple years ago. And they, again, like I said earlier, they weren't happy at all with the way the College Station Regional went last year. And they know what the deal is. They know, hey, the expectation here is to get to Omaha to be the 39th Texas team that gets it done. So I think they're excited about that. I don't think they're timid or nervous or anything. It really seems like they're excited, ready to get on the diamond and attack that. As far as the SEC part of it goes, guys, CJ, you heard guys talking about this. I don't think the talent, Blake, is going to be a shock to the system. I think the big challenge, and Schloss has alluded to this, and I don't think this is going to be something that this team deals with until they're into it. It's one thing to have, a one-off against an LSU, or, you go to a tournament at Globe Life or Minute Maid and you play some SEC teams, or, hey, you maybe have a weekend non-con against, David Pierce did that a couple times playing at LSU, but it's when you're, your 6th, 7th conference series, and it's like, man, we just played Mississippi State, we just played Ole Miss, we got done playing Tennessee, now we got to play Georgia, or now we got to play LSU. I think it's just like football and men's basketball, we've seen in women's basketball, it's just that constant grind of, man, we're seeing Sunday starters and 5th, 6th guys in a bullpen that still run it up 96, 97, 98. So I think that's the challenge and these guys know that. They're not going to know how they deal with it until they're really into it. But as far as the kind of the culture shock of just thinking about the SEC, I don't think that's something this group's even thinking about right now.
To add to that, Schloss did call the SEC, quote, the big leagues of college baseball. So that's certainly going to be something that he carries over from his time at A&M that I think is a little bit underrated, under the radar right now in terms of his transition over. But that's about it today for us here, Blake. I know that you got some nuggets from behind the scenes as well. Let's get to some of those real quick. And I believe one of them might actually include Adrian Rodriguez, who we talked about a little bit earlier on the offset.
Yeah, that's right. So I've been talking to a couple of sources that are, well connected, obviously, with the baseball program. And a lot of people have been asking me, what do you think the projected lineup is? What do you think? So finally, after doing some digging, we'll just, start from the top. And everyone wants to know about pitching. So let's start with pitching. So from what I've been told, Friday's starter looks to be Jared Spencer, the transfer out of Indiana State. Obviously, he's a senior. And then Saturday night, it looks like you're most likely going to have Luke Harrison, the redshirt junior. So those two pretty much set in stone. Of course, Harrison had surgery in 2023, played in about 10, 15 games in 2024, but coming on strong this year. So those two really seem to be the locks. As far as Sunday and a weekday goes, I've been told that is to be determined at this time. So still up in the air. There's, a few different names, few different avenues that they could go. CJ, one of the things that we talked about on our last video was Ruger Riojas out of UTSA, the transfer, Riojas, excuse me. And, just everybody has been raving about him. And, at the time they didn't know, do we put him in a starter role? Do we use him as a reliever? What exactly are we going to do with him? But I've been told, and if you're familiar with Texas A&M baseball last year, Evan Aschenbeck, he's going to be kind of in that role where, he's probably their best reliever, but not going to be a closer. But you will see lots of him week in and week out. I also checked in on Ace Whitehead. From what I've been told, his status is still kind of to be determined, still coming back from that injury. He had the surgery, of course, at the end of the season. And then after that, Jeff, and you alluded to this at the beginning, those three freshmen, they have been impressive from what I've been told. And I've been told that they will all contribute this season as well. So still, many different names to play around with. Grayson Saunier, Cade Bing, of course, is another one. Who knows where those guys are going to end up. But you do have your Friday and Saturday starters locked down, and we're hearing great things about, from the freshmen. Now then, with that said, Jeff, CJ, I mean, what do y'all think about Sunday when the weekday games? I mean, who's some names that people can expect to see?
Like, I think it's going to look like this. You're going to drop some names in the hat, and then you're just picking a little bit to start the year. Look, we heard quite a bit, right? Drew Rarick was one name. Volantis was another. I'm eager to see how, Saunier develops. Is that a guy that has starting potential? Another name that wasn't really talked about today was Aiden Moffitt out of LSU, right? His big kind of hurdle was finding the strike zone. And can Max Wiener get enough of that out of his, transfer bunch, his young bunch, to rely on them for a Sunday starter or a midweek start? We'll see. But right now, to your point, I think it's completely up in the air.
Yeah, one name, Blake, that got brought up that I'm sure there's some people screaming at their computer screen right now or their phone. Hey, what about Max Grubbs? What about Max Grubbs? He was an all-conference arm last year. They shut him down in the fall, so he didn't pitch at all. Yeah. And they're getting ready to have an inter squad right now. Schloss said, hey, this is the first time I'm actually going to see him pitch with my own eyes. So it's TBD on Max Grubbs. He, obviously he was a weekend starter last year. Maybe he falls into that Sunday role. Maybe he goes to the midweek role. Blake, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Bryce Navarre was the other freshman that I neglected to mention, the lefty out of Montgomery, who's also in that mix. But something I'm interested to see, and maybe it's something, maybe it's not. But Schloss talking about Luke Harrison, the job Max Wiener has done with him, changing some things. And again, we saw him trying to come back from TJ last year. I wonder some of the returning guys that you saw maybe flashes of at times. They just couldn't put together. I think of like an Easton Toomas,
Dre
Duplantier, which we know Dre's been through a lot during his time at Texas. Can Max Weiner get him right? A guy like George Zaharias, who wasn't available last year, from Tommy John, Cody Howard, Hudson Hamilton. I'm not saying all these guys are going to be answers, fellas, but if you can take a couple of those guys, one or two of those guys that really struggled last year, and kind of find maybe those one or two things that can, hey, maybe they're a guy that gives you, an inning and a third on a Saturday in the middle of an SEC series that helps you win a series.
Yeah.
Even if it's that, then Max Weiner will be definitely worth the salary if you can fix a couple of these guys that look, David Pierce in the previous regime, they didn't have a problem recruiting guys that threw hard. It's just, the mechanical work was an issue. And if Max Weiner can fine tune some of those things, whether it's Toomas or Zaharias, a couple of these guys, maybe you might have a couple, reliable bullpen hands to go with the freshmen. And then I think that's where the bulk of your bullpen stuff's going to come, though, Blake, is the McCreary and Saunier, some of those, the proven SEC arms that are going to be in your bullpen that they've been in those weekend series. I think that's going to come in. That's going to be invaluable once this thing gets started.
Blake, real quick, Schloss did say that Ace Whitehead is a ways away from return.
Yeah.
He said that surgery that he underwent in the offseason was a little bit too close or too far away, I guess is the better way to say it, from last year's conclusion. So a ways away, not really sure when a timeline would be available for him to return to the field.
Yeah, it's thoracic outlet syndrome, which is what Boogie had the surgery for. That's a tough thing to come back from. I mean, any of you Astros fans remember, way back in the day, J.R. Richard, that's what led to his stroke and stopped what could have been a Hall of Fame career. Texas fans might remember, Sam Stafford once upon a time was a first-round pick with the Yankees. They discovered during the physical that he had thoracic outlet syndrome, and he was never the same after that. So it's a really big deal. It can fix a lot, but yeah, I don't. And Schloss even said point blank, Blake, he's like, look, I don't know when Ace Whitehead's going to be able to help us or exactly what his role is going to look like if and when he gets back. So, look, everybody loves Boogie for what he did last year. I don't think anybody bleeds burnt orange more than Ace Whitehead, but I think people just got to be patient until he comes back. Just let him recover, and maybe at some point you get him back. Look, it may be he's a pinch runner in some games. I don't know. Yeah. It's total, like you said, Blake. It's you hit the nail on the head with your report. It's totally up in the air from what it sounds like.
Definitely. Well, guys, some of the other notes that I had, projected lineup as far as the rest of the field. So at center, we know Rylan Galvin, of course. But one of the position battles that we were watching early on was Stewart and Schuessler at first. I've been told that Schuessler has pretty much taken that job by the horns, for lack of a better term. Second base looks like it's going to be Ethan Mendoza. Third base was another position battle. We had Casey Borba and Adrian Rodriguez, who we've talked about at the beginning of this video here. And Adrian Rodriguez, like I said, it looks like it's his to lose. The freshman has been very impressive. And, of course, it helps that he's a switch hitter as well. Shortstop, Jalen Flores. I think the big question for shortstop is the depth behind Flores. That's where it kind of gets interesting for Texas. And they're still trying to figure out the pieces behind that, how they want that to fall. Left field, guys, it's going to be Easton Winfield, yet another impressive transfer and a kid that's been getting rave reviews behind the scenes. And then center field, earlier in the year, CJ, we talked about Tommy Farmer, Will Gasparino. Who will it be? That one looks like it's going to be Gasparino as well. And then right field, which no surprise, Max Ballou will be there. So that's what it sounds like right now, guys, as of January 24th. Obviously, anything could change, but we'll see what happens.
Blake, let me get your overall thoughts, and Jeff, you as well. It feels to me, especially with the pieces that Texas returned, we talked about the skeleton up the middle, but then you go out and you add a Mendoza, a Winfield, guys, Jaquay Stewart, another one with the big bats. What is that going to be the strength of this team early on? Is going to be the sticks?
I asked that actually. I was looking for some nuggets as far as getting in that batter's box, and what I was told was everybody looks good in batting practice. Batting practice is batting practice. Ask again here in a few weeks. So, but yeah, I mean, I think they've done a great job of adding some of those power guys, and I mean, there's definitely some question marks on this team, but I feel like from an offensive standpoint, we're going to see an improvement from where we were a year ago.
Yeah, my big concern wouldn't be the power, because between Schuessler, Flores, Gasparino, Ballou, even what Winfield did at ULM, you've got some guys that proven they can hit for power at the college level. My thing is, you lose a Jared Thomas, you lose a Peyton Powell, you lose a little bit, Blake, you lose a little bit of speed. So just the ability to be versatile in how you score and how you run your offense, how big a part is the running game going to be able to be for this team? Are they going to be a team that, how many guys do you have in this lineup that can, go from first to third on a ball hitting the gap? So that's the thing. I don't worry about this lineup hitting. And I'll tell you what, Blake, the interesting thing too is you look at, let's assume that, what we're talking about at first base and third base end up what happens with Schuessler and Rodriguez. Well, okay, between Stewart and Casey Borba, I like the fact you have options. You have a right-handed option for DH. You have a left-handed option for DH, because Blake, watching this stuff as closely as you do, I just felt there were times the last couple of years, too many times where they were too left-handed heavy and needed a little bit more versatility from the right side of the plate. Yeah. So I do like the fact that if your DH is either Stewart or Borba, maybe it depends on matchups or just whatever side of the bed Schloss wakes up on that day, but you've got a chance to go either righty or lefty, depending on the pitching matchup or whatever feel you've got for your DH.
No, I completely agree with you there, and I think that's a great point. Well, guys, one other question for you before we get out of here and close out this video, and it's something that I get asked quite a bit on Coffee and Football, so I'm curious to get y'all's thoughts. Number one, what do you predict for Texas this year? And number two, what would you call a successful season for this team?
I'll let you take it.
I always say, Blake, it's tough. It's tough to know, especially with as many unknowns as we've got right now, to say, oh, this team's going to finish, top 3 in the SEC. Especially, look, it's no different than what we're seeing in men's basketball right now. You can finish 10th in the SEC and be a team that can still go finish in the top 4 or in Omaha or be in a championship series. That ties into what to expect, what's the success. I always say, especially in this day and age of college baseball, where everybody's putting resources into it. This isn't, hey, this isn't the 80s anymore. This isn't the Gus heyday where there's like 5 or 6 schools doing it. It's college baseball is as fun and as competitive as it's ever been. Up and throughout, just up and down the lineup, it's deep. There's a lot of depth. If you get to the point, Blake, where you can host a regional, if you're good enough to host a regional, then I think that means you had a pretty good year. That means you probably finished in the top half of the SEC. You probably had a winning record in conference play, and you're one of the top 16-ish teams in the country. So I think if you get in a position to host a regional, then I think you've had a pretty good year.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think I might be a little different on this sense, and it stems from my frustration with, some football and some basketball is what's the weakness and how much does it hamper your team, right? For football, we've talked about red zone. For basketball, we talked about 5+ minute scoring droughts. Is there one like that for Texas baseball? Because last year, you'd see games where Texas was walking 8, 9, 10 batters in a game, and it was a struggle to consistently find the strike zone. Is that an issue again this year? We'll have to see. I think that we all believe in Max Wiener's ability to develop, but does that overarching weakness or Achilles heel, is that what stumbles and keeps this team from really competing at a high level?
Yeah. The other thing too, Blake, that I noticed, you really saw this with David Pierce's last couple of teams. It started with that 21 team, and then we really saw it in 22, 23, and 24. Everybody's got a guy. Everybody's got a stud now that they can run out on Friday night. Everybody's Friday night guy is really good. Where Texas the last few years has been really good is they were so dynamic offensively that by the time you start to eat into a bullpen, you get into somebody's Saturday or Sunday starter, they will eat mediocre to bad pitching alive. Can this team do that? Is this team, as I said, I don't worry about them hitting for pop. Can they be dynamic enough on a weekend? Now, again, you're going to find out real quick the difference between a Sunday starter in the Big 12 and a Sunday starter in the SEC is going to be a lot different. So where does this lineup fall in terms of that production, in terms of, hey, we're getting deep into the bullpen, we're getting deep into somebody's weekend rotation. What does that look like for Texas from now? And I think that's another tool at play to when you're trying to figure out how this team is going to do. That's just another unknown that we won't know it until they get there.
Yeah, definitely. Good stuff, guys. And I'm with you on that. And that's what my answer to a lot of people has been. Texas is going to be good, but the schedule is also great. You know, and you're going to face so much talent week in and week out. This isn't the Big 12, as you said, anymore, Jeff. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate those waters. But a fun season ahead, a lot of excitement ahead. I know everybody's pumped that Schloss is on campus. So it's going to be fun to watch it all unravel. There's no doubt about it.
Think about this, Blake, of how tough the SEC is. Go back to 2022, Schloss's first year at A&M. Ole Miss, by all indications, was the last team in. They were the last at-large team in. And there were a lot of people, you know, cussing the SEC up one side and down the other that didn't think Ole Miss deserved to be in. They ended up winning the whole thing.
Yeah.
So that tells you how tough this conference is. You can be the 64, you can be the last at-large team to get in and still have a chance to go win the whole thing. The teams in the SEC are that good.
They're tough. Yep.
It's absolutely insane to think about. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate it, especially right after the media availability. Can't thank y'all enough. For everybody out there, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Head on over to ontexasfootball.com. Become a member today. And don't forget, in celebration of Jeff Howe joining us, you can use promo code HOWE, HOWE, and get a full year for $39.95. Again, promo code HOWE at ontexasfootball.com. Well, gentlemen, we'll have to record another one here soon, especially baseball season now 21 days away. So I know we'll have a lot more. But again, thank you. And for CJ Vogel and Jeff Howe, I'm Blake Munroe, and we'll see you next time.